Thanks for joining us for tonight's event. My name is Kevin, and I'm one of the event hosts here at Powell's Books. Before we begin, I want to encourage you to check out our lineup of upcoming virtual events and in-store events by visiting our website at powells.com. If you don't already do so, please follow us on the social medias, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and our YouTube channel. Tonight, we are very happy to host Sasha taqʷšəblu LaPointe in conversation with Elissa Washuta. Sasha taqʷšəblu LaPointe has always longed for a sense of home. When she was a child, her family moved around frequently, often staying in barely habitable church attics and trailers, dangerous places for young Sasha. With little more to guide her than a passion for the punk scene of the Pacific Northwest and a desire to live up to the responsibility of being the namesake of her beloved great-grandmother, Sasha throws herself headlong into the world, determined to build a better future for herself and her people. Set against a backdrop of the breathtaking beauty of Coast Salish ancestral land and imbued with the universal spirit of punk, Red Paint is a story of the ways we learn to find our true selves while fighting to claim a place of our own. Examining what it means to be vulnerable in love and in art, LaPointe offers up an unblinking reckoning with personal traumas amplified by the collective historical traumas of colonialism and genocide that continue to haunt Native peoples. Red Paint is an intersectional autobiography of lineage, resilience, and above all, the ability to heal. LaPointe will be joined in conversation by Elissa Washuta, a member of the Cowlitz Indian tribe and author of the essay collection White Magic, which comes out in paperback tomorrow. And she's also the co-editor of the anthology Shapes of Native Nonfiction. This evening's event includes an audience Q&A. Please use that Q&A button that's at the bottom of your screen if you'd like to ask a question at any time. And if someone has typed a question that you'd also like to know the answer to, you can even upvote that particular question. Perhaps most importantly, please support Sasha and Powell's by purchasing copies of Red Paint from us. A link to buy that book, as well as a link to buy Elissa's books, will be shared in the chat a couple of times this evening. Sasha, Elissa, we're so excited to have you both with us tonight. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Kevin. Hi, it's good to see everybody. I'm Elissa Washuta. I'm so excited to be here with Sasha. We didn't mean to dress the same, but I embrace it. I'm not going to talk very much to get us started. Sasha's going to start by reading to us for a few minutes, and then I've got some questions, and I again encourage you to leave your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end. Thanks, Sasha.
Taqʷšəblu de Ishan, Estralchu, Cia, Cia, Taqʷšəblu, Seedsta, Twal Nuksak, Gwalskajit. Hi, everybody. I am Sasha taqʷšəblu LaPointe, and I'm honored to be here. Thank you, Powell, so much for hosting me and having me here tonight. It's like a little teenage Sasha baby dream come true to read at Powell's, even virtually, so thank you. I also want to say thank you to all of the amazing folks at Counterpoint Press for believing in this book and for bringing it into the world. And thank you to my amazing friend who's also like twinning with me, Elissa. We didn't plan it, but like, did we maybe have some psychic connection? Maybe. So I'm going to read three different excerpts from Red Paint tonight. One towards the beginning, one towards the middle, and one towards the end. So I'll jump around a bit, but that's how we're doing it tonight. And I'll just get started. Thank you, everyone who is joining us tonight. Naming ceremony. There's a photograph of me at my naming ceremony, small in a blue dress, mess of brown ringlets falling around my face as I teeter precariously close to the edge of a picnic table. The photo was taken in 1986. I am 3 years old. My arm is outstretched as if reaching for someone out of frame, and I am smiling. I'd like to think it was my great-grandmother just out of reach, coming to gather her namesake up in her arms, but there is no way of knowing. It could have been my mother. It could have been anybody. I have white socks with ruffles and strappy shoes. You can tell from the photo that my mother wanted me to look nice. You can also tell by the grin on my face that moments after the photo was taken, I would be barefoot, that my dress would be streaked in grass stains. When remembering that day, my mother sighs, laughs a little, and says, I looked across the yard, saw you on the table dancing next to a boombox, and just knew you were going to be a handful. That day, relatives passed me along in their arms. As uncles tended to the fire, as the salmon baked, friends and family tousled my hair, pinched my cheeks, and said things like, taqʷšəblu #2, and what hard shoes to fill. I like to think my great-grandmother knew what she was doing that day, that she knew the counter curse I would someday need, like the fairy godmother in Sleeping Beauty, who saved her gift for last and passed to the sleeping princess the only thing that could wake her. As a child, I would long for what princesses possessed: magic, courage, enchanted slippers, and the love of brave princes. I would come to yearn for new worlds and ways to escape. What I wouldn't realize was the power that was bestowed upon me that day, the magic my great-grandmother passed down. And it wasn't true love's kiss, it wasn't a prince, it wasn't a spell or a slipper, it was a name, taqʷšəblu, like an incantation, taqʷšəblu. It comes from deep in me, travels through parted lips, out into the world, and stays there. Spirit sickness. I had been sick several years ago when we lost my great-grandmother. As her namesake, I felt part of myself try to leave with her to the spirit world. Brandon had also been with me then. The last time I saw my great-grandmother was in the middle of a terrible snowstorm. My mother had called me at work, "You need to be here, now." I quickly untied my apron and ran out of the restaurant. Brandon and I had been dating for a year. He offered to drive me. My grandmother's house was an hour north of the city. I was panicked the entire way. The farther we got from Seattle, the more treacherous the storm became. Just outside the Swinomish Reservation, a semi-truck was jackknifed on the highway ahead of us. Brandon knew how to handle his truck in the snow, but this did little to calm my anxiety. The snow piled on the windshield. There was a silence in the cab of the truck that can only occur in winter when snow mutes the world. The only sound was the swoosh of the windshield wipers, bringing the highway back into view again and again. I sucked in a shallow breath and my lungs felt rushed. He asked if I had my inhaler. I did. I closed my eyes and pressed my head against the window. I tried to imagine that the world on the other side was safe. In the truck, my breath fogged patterns on the glass. A transformer somewhere above exploded, raining electric blue sparks down onto the white world. Cars alongside the freeway sunk into the snow. I rocked back and forth and sucked in air. I kept my eyes closed until I couldn't take it anymore. My hand shot toward the handle. Stop the truck. My chest sputtered with asthma and my heart drummed. This isn't safe. Look at those cars. Nobody is driving out here. Nobody is on the road. In the cab of the truck, I was a wide-eyed and feral thing. Brandon put the child lock on and calmly touched my shoulder, but I was angry. Mad at him like he was somehow causing the snow, mad at him for offering to brave the roads, mad at him like he somehow had control over anything. We have to keep going, he said. We're so close. And I knew he was right, and he knew it wasn't the snow I was afraid of. He knew that in 20 minutes we would arrive. I rode the rest of the way with my head in my hands. I didn't want to see the mile markers, the familiar farms, the channel, the recognizable world of my childhood blanketed in white. My eyes closed, I thought of her voice, the low, guttural sounds of our traditional language. I remembered the stories she told while I was growing up. I remembered the last meal we shared, oysters. Brandon safely pulled the truck in front of my great-grandmother's home. We're here. I sat with my hand on the door, watching the snowfall in the streetlight. Brandon walked around the truck and opened the door, and I fell out into the cold night against him. We walked up the icy steps, and my mom opened the door. Inside, everything glowed warm and orange. Cedar baskets lined the walls of my great-grandmother's small apartment, and candles burned pink lights around us. Here we were, 4 generations of women, my mother, my grandmother, me, and my great-grandmother, who looked small and frail. I lingered in the doorway with a lump in my throat, unable to move my legs until Brandon guided me slowly toward the pull-out sofa where my great-grandmother lay dying. She had been teaching Lushootseed again. Books and papers were scattered around the apartment. Lushootseed words scribbled in marker, big and black, filled yellow legal pads. My great-grandmother wore a purple terry cloth robe, and I noticed how it matched the Gatorade that my mom delicately lifted to her face. She sipped slowly, then lay back down. My mom motioned for me to come closer, and I did, lying down beside my great-grandmother on the mattress. Quiet filled the room, not the silence beyond the window of winter or snow-covered mountains, but the silence of how I imagined the buds of flowers must be before they open. Looking at the pink glow from the candlelight, the orange cedar of the baskets, and the purple liquid gleaming in the small glass at my great-grandmother's lips, I thought of spring. Her fingers wrapped around mine delicately, the skin translucent like petals. Outside, the world was white and frozen, but inside, I looked at the faces of the women in the room, 4 generations, all huddled quietly in the warmth. It felt like a hearth. It felt like abundance. You should really get going, dear. My mom looked out the window, then to Brandon. It's not going to stop. I glared at the window at the snow already piling on the hood of the truck. Brandon looked concerned. He mentioned to my mom and grandmother that I'd panicked in the truck, that I tried to open the door on the freeway. I didn't want to let go of my great-grandmother's hand and started to feel my breath go shallow again. With help, I stood. My grandmother hugged me, then my mother. They gave me a small white pill for the ride home. It's for anxiety, my grandmother told me. I looked down at the thing in my hand, then back to my great-grandmother and nodded. Outside, Brandon helped me to the truck. He fastened my seatbelt. I pulled his hand close and held it. All I could mutter was a simple, thank you. The roads twisted and curved through the snow-covered farm flats. In springtime, these fields were lined with rows of primary-colored tulips, attracting carloads of tourists. I wondered what indigenous flowers grew in this valley before the land was colonized. I tried to imagine what the land must have looked like when my great-grandmother was a girl, before dikes and farmhouses. I'll never hear her tell me a story in Lushootseed again, I said while staring at the window. I looked at the white pill in the palm of my hand, bit it in half, and tasted the bitter metallic flavor on my tongue. I got the call somewhere outside of Everett. She's gone. My mom's voice dissolved through the phone and the drug in my bloodstream. I didn't cry. Instead, I swallowed the other half of the pill. I leaned my head against the window and stared at the winter beyond, whiting out the world. I closed my eyes and hoped for sleep. I tried not to think of the long wait ahead, of waiting out winter. I tried to tell myself that spring was just around the corner. My spirit left me then, and for many days, all I did was sleep. I called into work. I kicked the covers away from my body. I tossed and turned. The curtains weren't dark enough, so I learned to ignore the daylight. Some mornings, I heard Brandon at the stove, heating water for tea, trying to get me to eat. I could almost get to him. I could almost get back to the world. But a wave would crash over me and my room would fill with water again and again, reminding me I was still asleep. Never waking, I got lonely. I chased a speck of paint like a white rabbit across the bedroom wall, convinced if I followed it long enough, it would lead me back to the waking world. But my eyes were too heavy, and I lost the speck of paint again and fell deeper into slumber. I slept days and weeks away. I slept my body sore. I slept through several bill cycles, and eventually my mother called. "You can't sleep like that," she told me. "You need to see a healer. You need to wake up." In the months that followed, my mother took me to our medicine worker, the same one who had been with us at great-grandmother's burning ceremony. Burning ceremonies are done to help prepare those we have lost for their journey into the spirit world. We burn their clothes, their belongings, their favorite food, anything that might help them on their way. Great-grandma was hanging out, reluctant to pass on, reluctant perhaps to leave us. So we gathered in the field behind her house at the fire pit. My uncle and father stoked a bonfire while people inside the house prepared food. When the ceremony started, I was stable, sturdy, and upright. I was strong and able to face it. But by the time the song started, I began to feel weak. I began to tremble. I saw plates of food stacked onto the fire and burning away. I saw salmon, potato salad, and fry bread as it blackened and disappeared. I saw my mother bent over the fire, carefully pouring a tiny glass of purple Gatorade into the flames. She did this as gently as she had when she brought it to my great-grandmother's lips the night she died. Something in me gave out. Like a string that had been pulling me upright, I snapped. Like a marionette cut down, I fell. The world went cold. It was winter, it was cold. But all of a sudden, the cold got inside of me, found its way into my bones. I shivered as I fell apart next to the fire. I desperately wanted to yank the sweaters, the plates of food, her belongings, things she had touched one by one from the fire and cling to them, to hold them to my chest, to clutch their warmth until they turned to ash in my hands. I frantically looked around the field for my great-grandmother. I was sure she would come for me, to collect me, to take me away with her, because surely I had died out here. But no spirit came. The medicine worker had witnessed this. He had felt her spirit clinging to me the way they sometimes do. If they stay too long, he explained to me, you can get very sick. The work he did on me was to help her move on, to help me move on. After seeing the healer, my mom and I drove home from the tribal center. She reminded me that I come from a long line of strength. "Grandma," I asked, still feeling her absence in my chest when I said it aloud. "And Aunt Susie?" My mom nodded, but she also reminded me about the woman called taqʷšə. Years earlier, my mom had told me the story of a woman who lived on the southern coast of Washington. taqʷšə fled her village following a smallpox epidemic that had claimed the lives of her loved ones. Alone for the first time, she married a settler, a Scottish sea captain of the Hudson Bay Trading Company. The captain had learned that any white settler marrying an Indian woman received twice the allotment of land, though she was not permitted to live in the same house. He made her a small shack with a dirt floor, 4 walls, and 1 window. How strong would you have to be to survive something like that? My mom asked it aloud, but I didn't answer. That's when she reminded me that taqʷšə's blood was my blood. You're a direct descendant. But that night, as I trembled in bed, as the record still spun, as the rain hammered down, as my fiance brushed the sweat and hair from my face, I felt far away from my body. Whatever strength supposedly coursed through my veins was dormant. If I had something inside of me at all, it was hidden, out of reach. Deadman's Cove. Goonies never say die. I thought about this as I crested the Astoria Bridge. A thick gray fog enveloped my car, the seafoam green metal of the bridge appearing and disappearing. As I came down the other side, Astoria came into view. Goonies never say die, but Goonies never had to say colonization or relocation or smallpox. I crossed the large mouth of the Columbia River, the place where the river met the sea. I was on my own treasure hunt, but I wasn't looking for gold. I was looking for answers. My room at the Riverwalk Inn was small and cozy against the dark afternoon. A drizzle slid down the windows as I read family histories and letters wrapped in my grandmother's shawl. The place beyond the window felt charged, connected to me in some way I couldn't name. Pan, my dog, needed a walk, so I ventured out into the town. Astoria was cute. Quaint storefronts promise handcrafted art, nautical-themed wall hangings, knits, and things made with shells. I passed by the shops and breweries along the wet wood of the boardwalk. Pan obsessed over the lingering scent on a urine-soaked planter box. I left her to it, looping her leash around a bike rack before popping into the Gypsy Treasure Chest, a shop claiming to house curios, gemstones, Wiccan spellbooks, and all things spiritual. Inside, I found only kitschy gifts, imported jewelry, belly dance costumes, tumbled rocks, and tarot cards. I eyed the decks on display, the fairy oracle, the goddess deck. I rolled my eyes when I found it. Native American medicine cards. The deck featured a painted wolf circled within a dream catcher on the cover, and aside from my own reflection in my bathroom's mirror, it was my first native sighting since arriving in Astoria. I turned the box over and read the contents. Raven, bear, badger, and coyote. Spirit animals all representing different omens. This one means financial stress. This one means emotional blocks. This one means distress, and so on. Neither the artist nor the creator of the medicine deck were native. I felt annoyed, but worse than that, I felt lonely. After purchasing a small vial of rose oil, I thanked the silver-haired white man wearing a turquoise ring and left. Pan stopped at a patch of grass on a corner. As she walked circles in the small park, I looked out across the water. El Waco was somewhere out there, past the beach and through the trees. Tucked somewhere along that coast was the small fishing village my ancestor called home. After dinner, I watched The Goonies in my hotel room. I watched the film not as research, but in an attempt to cheer myself up on this lonely trip down the coast. I tried to enjoy the truffle shuffle, the baby Ruth, and the slick shoes. I couldn't help but wonder why there wasn't a Chinook Goonie. Shouldn't there be? I amused myself with visions of my Chinook Goonie with braids and the ability to catch a salmon, but there was no Chinook character in the Goonies, not even a background character. The story took place here, on Chinook land, yet my Indigenous ancestors were invisible. I went to bed worried about what I might find in El Waco. With Pan curled against my feet on the oversized hotel bed, I dreamt of tidal waves, canoes crashing against the rocks, and the great bodies of whales slamming into my hotel window. I woke early and downed a cup of hotel coffee. Pan and I hit the road as the sun rose over a glittering Columbia River. Victorian houses dotted the hills and cliffsides overlooking the water. Almost every house in Astoria was Victorian, with wraparound porches and rooftops decorated with ornate carvings. I thought that they looked like toy houses, doll houses, something made up and pretend. I closed my eyes at a stoplight and tried to imagine the land here before the ships came, before the settlers made Astoria what it was, quaint, beautiful, and white. I drove through the town of Chinook on my way to El Waco and pulled off the road at the first heritage site I encountered. It was an unimpressive patch of land with a few rickety picnic tables dotting the tree line. I let Pan off leash and walked to the edge of the park. Through the trees, I stood in awe of the coastal beauty. The tree line gave way to a sparse and rocky shore. Gray stones, crawling waves, and the long branches of trees sweeping over the beach like hands. This was my favorite of nature's intersections, the forest and the sea. To see windswept coastal trees, jagged rocks, and crashing waves ignited something in me. It always felt like a memory. It felt like home. Pan sniffed around the base of a wooden sign. The painted placard told of a certain kind of seabird, a big and beautiful creature that called this coastline home. I looked up from reading in a silly moment of hoping that I might spot one circling. Returning to the text, I read on to discover that this particular shore was where Captain Whoever first spotted these massive birds from his ship off coast. The rocky shoreline was treacherous, but the placard honored the seamen for their bravery, for maneuvering their boats carefully to shore. This site was noted for being a favored hunting ground for these prized birds. I watched my dog take a shit in the wet grass. I didn't pick it up. The next site I encountered was Fort Columbia on the river. A sign in the parking lot informed me that if I didn't pay for a day pass, I would receive a big fine. I parked and didn't pay. If a park ranger stopped a Coast Salish girl and her dog wandering the sites of the first settlement on her people's land, would they really give her a ticket? I was sure they would, but I wanted the chance to challenge it anyway. To my disappointment, we wandered the abandoned fort undisturbed. It was a bust, just a bunch of sterile wooden buildings, old and empty. Historical facts printed on signs faded by sun. The white men who once lived here were barbers, musicians, and farmers, not only soldiers. This was a community. On my way out, I stopped at the massive wooden sign hanging close to the entrance. In bold letters, it read, Fort Columbia, here was the home of the Chinook Indians. Was. The word caught in my throat like a cough, like something you try to swallow. They once lived here. That was the only information about my ancestors provided in the large park and all of its preserved buildings, its old guns and bunkers, just 13 words. That's all they could spare. The Chinook people did not have some wild adventure like the Goonies. There was no fantastic and quirky way to save their beloved home. There was no cave of whimsical booby traps or skeleton pianos to conquer. No pirate ship loaded with gold would keep them here. There wasn't much to the town of Ilwaco, a couple of tourist shops, a fish and chips place, a cannery. The Heritage Museum was run by an ancient white woman. She smiled when she greeted me, gave me a walking map of Ilwaco, and left me to wander the corridors and the small rooms of the museum. I saw sepia-toned portraits of Chinook people, canoes, and paintings of plank houses. A young woman in a portrait behind glass wore an almost identical pair of dentalium shell earrings to the ones that I had on that day. I ran my fingertips along the delicate ends of the white shells, down to the antique beads, and traced the glass where the woman's earrings hung. We wear them because we are loved. Tanya's words echoed in my head. I visited the town's small library next. There I discovered that Taqʷšə and Captain James Johnson were considered the first family of Ilwaco. In an old historical society book, I learned the captain had died at sea. That's all it said. Captain James Johnson died at sea. Next, I read about a place called Dead Man's Cove. I knew I had to go. Through the density of the forest came the sound of waves against rock. Pan and I quickened our pace. The tree line opened up and revealed a steep cliffside. Beneath the drop-off, waves roared against massive black rocks jutting out from the blue depths of the cove. Dead Man's Cove was picturesque. The water a dark, clean blue. Sword ferns and trees grew along the climbing stones. The water raged, sending tall waves and sprays of sea foam into the trees. This part of the coast, where the Columbia meets the ocean, is known as the graveyard of the Pacific. Over 2,000 ships have gone under here. Beneath the beauty of the surface lie pile upon pile of wrecked ships, a cemetery of drowned men, decaying boats, nameless explorers. Perhaps this was where the captain met his demise, right here in Dead Man's Cove. I watched the ocean beat itself against the beach and said a silent thank you. Perhaps the ocean had been looking out for my ancestors as it claimed one ship after another. Perhaps it was trying to keep them safe. The men who sailed here brought disease and gold and alcohol. They brought treaties and names for places already named. They crossed an ocean to climb these shores, and the water pulled them under when it could, to keep the land as it was, even if only for a moment longer. I paid my respects not to the men lost at sea, but to the sea itself, the power beneath the waves. Thank you.
Sasha, that was amazing. Thank you so much for reading to us. Oh, there's so much I want to talk to you about. So for everyone in attendance, when did we meet? We met in like 2013, 2014. I sent Sasha a fan email after reading her poem in the literary magazine. We both lived in Seattle. We became friends. And then we started working together at Institute of American Arts, totally by chance, and, you know, became friends. And I am just so excited to see this book, having, you know, read the manuscript of Little Boats and worked with you on that. It is amazing to see how you've built a book around another book, and are kind of, it's like a basket that's like holding this other book. And I just love to see what you've done. I think, you know, like, we are dressed the same. We both come from Columbia River people and other people. And I think that there are lots of similarities in our books. And I love that we were both at the same time going off on our own and to be alone to write these books that we needed to write. And so I want to hear all about that. I want to hear, first, I'm hoping you could just talk about that process of building a book around another book to hold it.
Yes, thank you. That's a great question. And also, I do remember it was 2014. We had like a coffee date at Elliott Bay.
Yes.
I remember it like it was yesterday. So yeah, the process. I also love the basket metaphor, of course. But I think for me, and like, no spoilers, I guess, for the book, but like, I do reference the process of writing that first manuscript, Little Boats, a lot in red paint. But I think that spending my MFA program, like, just like really diving headfirst into writing a memoir, I was so sure that like that's what I needed to do, and like felt like so strongly about Little Boats in that first manuscript. But I guess I didn't realize what doing that would entail, you know, like diving deep, like excavating these memories. If you don't really have the tools for that, you know, it was really hard for me. I sort of like dislodged some things and became very, you know, I did finish it. I finished the manuscript, but in doing so, I really challenged my mental health and my spirit. And I put that book aside and took a big break from writing. You know, I think that's when I like joined Medusa Stare and did some fun freaky punk stuff, and, you know, played shows and did that. And it was like very healing for me. And in doing that, that's when I started to realize that I think that I wanted to write something new. And to get there, I had to write that book first. My dog is scratching herself and it's very loud. I'm sorry. Thank you, Pan, for.
Hi, Pan.
It's great musical contribution. Anyway, for me, like, I put away Little Boats and took a break from writing. And then in doing so, I realized that I was actually needing to heal. And that's what red paint was about. And like, I think that's what I wrote red paint like very fast, you know, as opposed to the several years I spent with little boats. Red paint like came to be very fast, and like I put it all out there. And yeah, I feel like I've completely derailed from the question, but
Not at all. Not at all. You know, I was thinking as you were reading, so as you know, before I knew you, I was a real admirer of the work of your great grandmother. And as you were reading that second section, I was just thinking about how, you know, both of you have done this work to like create something for the world, even though it's hard. And I was thinking about that a lot as I was reading Red Paint, just the, you know, the both, you know, your great grandmother as part of this book, but also, you know, I think a model for process, or at least I see similarities in your processes. And, you know, and that's something I've always admired about her, the way that she did work for her people, even when it was hard. So I was, and of course you use your Aunt Susie's story in here too. I was wondering if you could talk about like the process of using ancestral tools and ancestral stories, and just what that work was like.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that, you know, growing up really, really close with my great grandmother and being her namesake, and, you know, spending so much time with her as a tiny human, I knew that she was always going to be like, I have had such a connection with her my whole life that of course she was always going to be kind of at the forefront of whatever story I was telling. And then Aunt Susie kind of showed up later. And again, another ancestor who I've been told, you know, the stories of. There's a portrait of her like on the opposite wall right now. You know, I've grown up with like her story and who she was around me too. But like there was a moment in writing Little Boats, actually the first manuscript, that when I wasn't doing so great, you know, and I was really struggling. And my parents had gifted me the Aunt Susie, The Wisdom of a Skagit Elder, years before this, right? And I kept doing that like shitty like teenager thing, and like shitty I'm in my 20s and like distracted by life thing, where I was like, I'll read it later. And I woke up from a dream where I mean, I think it's in Red Paint, but I had dreamt of her. And I'm getting a little woo, but this is all part of my process and a very real, very lived experience. But I woke up and immediately felt drawn to go to the Aunt Susie book, and dove into her story and those incredible transcriptions that my grandmother put together in that book. And then and like thought about, and you know, it's like my grandmother, Aunt Susie, and taqʷšəblu. I thought about all of them and really like, you know, dove into their lives and their stories and what I had learned about them. And then it made a lot of sense to me, especially like when I dreamt of Aunt Susie when I did, and was like, that means something, like something is there. And then started putting that, like writing it down and putting it into my story. And then absolutely had to go to my parents and show them and be like, hey, this is what I'm writing about. Like, is this okay? Like, can you tell me what you think? Like my great grandmother makes a lot of sense because we do have that connection, but Aunt Susie was someone that I hadn't written about. And so I did feel like I needed that permission from them. And I showed them, and they were like, this makes so much sense. Why do you think we gave that book to you when you were like, spiraling like a little chaos tornado? But I feel like just at different times in my life when I was growing as like an artist and, you know, just a human in the world, like they sort of appeared to me when I needed them. And I learned, you know, I was kind of like, oh, okay, I hear you, I'm listening. And then of course, to get permission to be able to write about them too was an important part of my process. Did I answer that?
Yeah, absolutely. Just a reminder to everybody, you can put questions in the Q&A. I'm going to ask you one more question. We'll get to Blaine's question, and anybody else's question if you want to ask. So I guess, well, you kind of answered this, but I kind of want to ask anyway, because maybe you didn't answer it all the way. So I think that, like, from, you know, what you're saying here and what I know about your process, I know that, you know, there like was a lot of patience required with your story coming to you, and, like, you know, you being able to use it, like put it, like create the proper form for it in its own time. And I'm wondering if you could talk more about, like, being patient with the process and the role of intuition in you know, getting to this book.
Yeah, I mean that the patience part, and the even like wow, I'm like, let me, yes, no, I don't think I fully answered this question, and I have a lot to say about it, but I think after going through the experience of writing, like, God, I think Little Boats was like crazy long too. I think it was like 400 pages or something embarrassing.
No, I don't think so.
I thought it was really
Was
long.
it?
Maybe
It
I'm
felt
like,
fast. It was fast to read.
but you know, after pouring so much of myself and like kind of tackling that work, and as I said, like kind of in doing so, I sort of became undone, and then that started a whole different process in my own personal journey. But having completed something like that, for any writer who knows what it's like to like start to finish complete something, no matter what the content, it's a big deal. And to have that sort of, people were interested in it. Like I spent like a year with people, like different agents, different publishers being like, oh, we like this, let us read more. But like again and again, it was just rejected. And I think that everybody, it's like common, it's like, oh, you have to get used to rejection as a writer. But this felt like an absurd amount of rejection, and absurd amount of people being really interested in it, be like, we like this, but, and it just happened to me like for a year solid. And to put that away, like I literally was like, all right, I'm bartending and waiting tables at like a punk pizza place in Georgetown. I'm just gonna do that for a while. Like my patience was like, okay, I'm done for a second. My dogs are about to go off. Sorry. Okay. But having to like kind of put that aside and be like, all right, I'm gonna wait tables, I'm gonna like play music, I'm gonna go on tour and hang out with my friends. I took literally like a huge break from it in order to, and I feel like that's okay. I don't know, for any like other writers who like just keep, I don't know, I felt like I was hitting my head against like closed gates over and over. And it was just important for me and necessary for me to walk away and find something else that brought me joy and like helped in my process of healing and stuff. So I feel like maybe I wasn't well, I mean, I was patient, but then I was like, whoa, I knew when I needed a break from it, and just to be like, all right, this isn't happening right now. I need to go do something else. And then when red paint became a thing, and I gave it to my family to read, there were moments, I feel like this is maybe attached to your question. There were moments though where my mom absolutely like circled things and was like, you can't say this, like you can't do that. And then to have this be like, oh shit, well, now I have to go back to square one and start. And she was right, of course, and I'm gonna listen to her. But then I had to like restructure things a little bit based on like what would be appropriate and respectful to share. So I feel like in both of those things, the weird like hiatus I took, and then, you know, having my parents and my family look at red paint and tell me to go back to the drawing board a little bit, like there's a lot of patience involved. Now I'm just rambling. I'm going to stop.
No. I think it's so important, you know, I think especially for writers who go through MFA programs and have the, you know, just the dates, you know, the deadlines and the expectations and the, you know, the structure of that. I think it can be hard to give ourselves that grace to like just spend time doing something else. But I mean, you know, we know like it works on the day-to-day level. Like you can't sit at the computer, you know, if the writing's not coming. Going for a walk helps. And, you know, I think that like a month-long or year-long walk can be really helpful too. So I think it's just like a beautiful model for like, you know, a way to do things that I think we really need. All right, so I'm gonna go to the chat and I'm gonna ask Blaine's question first. Red Paint is very rooted in punk and the underground music scene of the Northwest, even to the degree that it comes along with a very carefully curated playlist. If you had to choose one song, album, or band that has influenced your writing process, what would it be?
Oh, that's so rude. That's so rude. We just talked about this where I was like, you can never ask that. You can never say that's like, even just name your top 5 albums or what. Oh, they're just trolling me right now. Let me think. Just one. For Red Paint in particular, if I had to choose just one, I'd say when I was writing it, and I mean, there is a playlist, Counterpoint, like, I think it's published somewhere. You can go to Spotify and hear the Red Paint playlist. So there's that, put a pin in that, that's there out in the world. But if I had to choose just one, I think something that I was listening to over and over in the process of writing was The Wipers. Northwest, like sad punk band. Like I was listening to that a lot as I wrote, but that is still like, I'm finding a loophole to that question because it is so not okay to ask anybody that question.
It's your event. You can answer whatever way you want. All right, we've got a question from Lorraine. Both of your books have had a huge impact on my thinking as a white woman living in the Pacific Northwest. Was thinking about you this weekend when Jane Campion, in response to Sam Elliott's homophobic comments, declared that the West is a mythical space and there's plenty of room on the range. I'm wondering if you can speak to white folks' assertion that the West is some kind of blank canvas they can rewrite.
Ew. Oh my God. Like all of that is so, and if I can speak to that other than it just making me kind of violently angry right now.
I think it's like, you know, I was thinking about, I mean, I could start answering it. I would, because I was thinking about another question when I was like rereading my blurb that's on the back of the book. Everybody should buy it, by the way. You know, I mentioned that that you use sturdy materials, rose quartz, cedar bark, red clay, words of your ancestors. I'm thinking about how, I don't know, like the indescribable materiality of like our story, like our literary forms and, you know, and like, of course, visual art and just, I don't know, like the materiality of connections that we have, you know, like I'm wearing one of my baskets, you have your baskets, and I always keep my cowlitz blanket that I was wrapped in with me for events, and was flipping through your book and opened up to the blanket ceremony chapter, and, you know, and just thinking about how incredibly full the world is and has always been. I was going to say here, where you are, here too, but, you know, like speaking about like Coast Salish territory, I think like your book is such a book of place in a way that I think is really beautiful and important.
Yeah, thank you. And I think too that like that's so, I don't know, to have a story like and I like we need like dozens of stories, like an endless amount of stories coming from here, because this idea that it's just like a blank canvas, that we're like sort of not here just because we haven't been like put on blast and like crappy like old like Hollywood. I feel like there's so much of the world's perception of us is just like frozen in time, like as like Native folks, that it's like, no, like you like more stories like coming from our you know, unique spaces to be like, no, like we're here. It's not just a blank canvas.
Yeah, like you read read that section, you wrote about those, sepia toned photos of people along the Columbia River, and like, of course, I write about them too because one of them was my great aunt, and is pictured with her. Edward Curtis took some pictures of her in her canoe, and like, yeah, I think that those kinds of photos and everything are just like such a like specific example of that, where Edward Curtis like removed the alarm clock from a photo of a couple of men because inappropriate. It broke the reverie of the West.
I mean, I get angry when I'm on like ferry boat rides and you just see it's like walking through Hull. I'm like, I mean, I love a ferry boat ride, but like all of those like photos of it's like, okay, cool, we're on ferries, and like here it's like Coast Salish woman on the beach, two men with a canoe. Like it's, I don't know, it's this idea that like that's enough. Like here they are, like here's some Coast Salish folks kind of again frozen in time in this idea, like I don't know, like that it's, I was about to go on a total tangent, but I feel like it has the same vibe of the question.
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm also, like you were talking about the process of like getting permission to tell your story, and I think that that's something that we're I mean, I know a lot of Native writers are like holding these things in tension, like this need to tell our stories and to have like real representation of ourselves and our families, but at the same time there are real protocols in place around like intellectual property and family stories and songs and everything. And there's also like both those protocols that are like very old, but also ones that have developed in response to colonization because of the co-opting of these stories, and also the like the potential for like spiritual sickness and things from occupying and taking these stories. So I don't know, I don't remember where I was going with that. It was going to be a question or something, but I think that like, oh yeah, I guess I was just saying, I think that this is that work that we have to do, and the fact that we do have to, I think remove some things from our stories or never write about some things that that I don't think, some of these particular things I don't think are things that all writers have to deal with. And, and I think, of course, there's like good reason for it and it is respectful, but I think that like that impacts this too, creating this sense that there is a void, or that, that there's nothing there. It's just hidden from view purposefully.
Yeah, I feel like I had a very like intense experience like early on when folks were first reading the draft of Red Paint, and like this sort of request to be like, can you be more clear about this? Can you be this part feels vague? And I would then go to my mom and be like, can I? And she'd be like, absolutely not. And I'm like, yeah, totally, got it. But that was real, and like to have to kind of fight, like to have any kind of pushback as like a new writer and like a new like brand new baby book. Like I felt like it was a really hard thing for me to push myself against that and be like, no, I actually can't elaborate on this certain thing. It would be incredibly disrespectful. Like I'm not going to do that. Like and that was something that happened again and again when I would first share the manuscript with people, and that was a really good learning experience for me to be like, oh, okay, you have to have like these solid boundaries about keeping what isn't meant to be shared, private. But then also on the flip side of that, like having the permission from my parents to to wear red paint. Being on, like, I remember being on tour. I think we're in Chicago. We were playing a show. We're outside this venue, and like my bandmates were in the van, and there was like these two younger white women, like very audibly like complaining that they saw me walking around. They were like, "There's a woman wearing war paint. You know, we should get this show shut down." They were just like super angry, and like, and I think they thought that they were like stepping up for some cause. They were like, "We're gonna go talk to the person and get this shut down. Like, how disrespectful. Some, like, the person in this band is wearing like paint on their face. Like, that's so disrespectful to the Native Americans." And like,
Oh my God.
my bandmates swung open the door. They'd heard all this, and they were like, "You know what? Like, that is our, like, she's a spoken word performer. You can go ask her about why she's wearing that, and she can tell you or not. That's up to her." But like, it was just this moment where they like kind of stood up for me, and they were like, "Yo, like, you're kind of not the right battle here." And I think about that, and I'm like, I am happy that I am sharing what I'm sharing about my experience as you know, a Coast Salish woman, and like someone that moves in these worlds of like, I mean, punk has been so notoriously white for so long that like these people at the show didn't even know what like a mixed heritage Coast Salish woman looked like, and they were all up in arms ready to shut us down. And it was like, wow. So I'm in some ways like being like, yes, I want to share like my story. I mean, for that woman specifically, I want her to read it.
Yeah, you know, I think like it's so interesting. I've been noticing, you know, these past few years that I've been, you know, teaching creative writing full time. I've noticed that like there is this cultural difference that I'm feeling when it comes to asking questions and like asking for more information. It's something that like I just, you know, I don't know. I just don't approach you know, the creative writing like revision process or like workshopping process with those questions at the forefront, I think, because it's been so important to me to be able to work with those gaps. And like, you know, I just think that it's so interesting, as you know, like simultaneously writing white magic and like teaching, just thinking about how important it is to like push back a little bit against that idea that everything needs to be known, like that like an essay is not complete unless somebody is, you know, completely knowable. And you know, I just think that that's like something that is I just treasure so much about your book, is that there's it's just presenting this very important way of knowing, and like a way of knowing that is not like that resists consumption, that is just wholly its own. That's actually a great note to end on. We're right at 9 o'clock or 6 o'clock your time, 9 o'clock Ohio time. It's just been so wonderful to talk to you, to spend time with you. And I just appreciate you and your book so much. And thank you so much to Powell's. Thank you, Kevin, for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you both, Elissa and Sasha. This is the book right here, Red Paint. I put a link to it in the chat, and you will find it right there. Click on that link, buy the book from us. I noticed that there are these cool little signed book stickers on the inside too. It even says taqʷšəblu on it. And here's Elissa's book. This is the hardcover, but the paperback comes out tomorrow, and that's going to be exciting. White magic, get that. I'm also going to post in the chat for you to click on our YouTube channel. This event was recorded and will be going up on our YouTube channel sometime tomorrow. So if you have friends that missed it or you want to share this with people, feel free to click on that link and share this event with your friends and family tomorrow. Elissa and Sasha and everyone at home, thank you so much. And from everyone at Powell's, have a great night.
Thank you.